And welcome to the Green Dialogue, everybody. We've been doing this, well, actually, this week is our 3rd-year anniversary. So we've been doing this every Wednesday at 9 o'clock since Earth Day of whatever 3 years ago was. Many of you have been on a lot of those calls. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so you might want to mute yourself if you're not speaking. Anyway, today we have a special guest, David Yocca, who was referred by Sam Lovell to talk a little bit about some of the work that he's doing and a program called CITES, which is to certify sustainability of landscapes and outdoor projects. And we hope to learn a little bit more about that as we seek to make our community or sustain our sustainability in our Meridian Township and beyond. So welcome, everybody. It's nice to see some old faces. Sam, do you want to say a couple words just to introduce David?
Well, sure. I guess I might want to say first that this recommendation also came from Wendy Fry. Wendy and I and David have known each other for I don't know how many years, as landscape architects, hang out together pretty regularly. And from my standpoint, as I mentioned in the past, David is his focus has been in environmental design for as long as I know, as you know, before many people got into that realm. And so he should be. I'm certain he's perfect to be talking today about the CITES program.
All right. Well, thanks, Sam and Leroy and Wendy for inviting me, and nice to be with you all. I'm not too far away. I'm over in Grand Rapids, and have been well, I'm mostly originally from Michigan, and got my degree in landscape architecture from Michigan State, and then was practicing it at a couple of firms in Illinois for a number of years, and that's when I really began to learn about and started practicing or striving to practice ecologically based design, and have been blessed to be part of a number of different both projects as well as initiatives to advance a more sustainable approach. And the terms continue to evolve, and sustainable, like a lot of things, has grown to mean a lot of different things. And so words are sometimes kind of limiting. So I try to think more of concepts and use a variety of words to get clarity on what are oftentimes more complex subjects than meet the eye, and that's certainly the case with living systems and with an ecological approach or perspective on landscapes and sites. And I guess to that end, as I'm the focus of what I'll share with you this morning is a program that I and a number of others were part of developing and have now been operating for a number of years, called the Sustainable Sites Initiative. And so I'm going to start sharing my screen here just so we can get a little bit of imagery to go along with the conversation. So let's see here. All right. Can we all see that now? All right, good. The Sustainable Sites Initiative is a rating system that is a tool to help advance more sustainable practice in the area of landscape architecture and landscape and site design. So it's really a means to an end, like the other high performance building and site rating systems. You're probably more familiar with LEED, which has been around longer. There's literally hundreds of different rating and certification systems for green buildings and practices. And CITES was developed because there was at the time really a gap. There was a lot that dealt with infrastructure, appliances, and with buildings, but not much as related to site elements specifically. And Lee does have a couple of credits that address site to a degree, but there was a gap. So that was really the origin, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But just two more words of background. As I mentioned, I was with one planning firm for a number of years, and we did a lot of what I would say is more conventional land development and zoning work, and I just as an entry level out of school, was basically just doing production, drafting and just learning, and more and more I saw the things that we were doing resulting in places that didn't really speak to me and what I thought were the most sustainable places. And there was more dialogue about things like walkable urbanism and more mixed land use and more sustainable practices from a land planning standpoint. And so I started gravitating towards those things and was able to be part of a number of larger scale community plans that embrace those ideas. And then that's when I really began to learn about the ecological focus and balancing water, energy, and nutrients locally on site as a part of a sustainable strategy, and the potential for our landscapes to heal and regenerate with the right kind of human intervention, even after they've been completely altered. And the two images I have on this slide, the one on the left is a mixed-use project called Coffee Creek in Northwest Indiana that was really meant to be originally a community of the future, and was developed initially by a company that was part of the power company for Northwest Indiana, and they were looking at kind of a sustainable future from a land use standpoint, and employed the best practices. And this is a little section of Coffee Creek that was completely degraded when we started, and just by a strong focus on restorative landscapes, putting water back into the ground, and protecting and restoring the remnant ecology that existed on site, and then bringing back others. This is part of the greenway that's the center of the development, and now it's been restored to clean water that's touchable, accessible, and integrates people back into the space, but also a healthy ecology. So that's one, and it's pretty amazing to see this transformation. So it was kind of eye-opening for me to realize the potential for healing. And then the image on the right is a type of green infrastructure, a green roof, our first eco roof on a building in the Midwest as a demonstration on Chicago City Hall's portion of the building, and it was meant to explore the idea of living roofs, surfaces, and it not only has become a little bit of an ecological oasis in the city, and it's in the way it is it's designed and stewarded continues to evolve as an ecosystem, and on a surface. It's not connected to the ground, obviously, and it's providing cooling and habitat and beauty and sound attenuation and a lot of other human benefits that are necessary for human health and well-being, especially in urban areas. And so those two ideas kind of come together with the concept of putting back a healthy ecology wherever we can. And so that's really what's behind the Sustainable Sites Initiative. So kind of building on that a little bit, the notion is that every project holds the potential to be restorative and to take wherever a particular site is on that ecological spectrum and improve it from an ecosystem service standpoint, and to amplify the benefits that we get as people from healthy ecosystems. And I'll share this slide deck with you, Leroy, after this. So because I'm going to go through some of this pretty quickly, so I can get to your questions. But Fritz Steiner was also one of the people behind developing this tool, and basically makes the point that that landscapes, in order to get this ecological approach, you need to have tools to understand and quantify that. And so that's part of it, and that the sites have the potential to provide these ecosystem services. So ecosystem service is the term that's used to describe clean air, clean water, healthy food, all the products and services that healthy sites can deliver if they are designed and operated and stewarded to do that. And then sites helps to quantify that. And all manner of places and sites, urban, rural, different land uses, sites with buildings, sites without buildings. So it's meant to cover, like I said, everything that is the landscape, i.e. the skin of a building out. So the entirety of the outside world is the realm of sites. And there's some good examples now of certified projects that show kind of a before and after this ecological thinking and approach. And it's getting away from the notion of a single use anything. So like these detention basins on the left, single purpose is flood management. And they don't all do a complete job of that, but help with flood management by temporarily parking stormwater off of surfaces, but they're otherwise bereft of life and not very attractive and don't really provide other benefits. Whereas the images on the right, the same spots that have been looked at with a more holistic approach, provide those same services, but a lot of other things as well. Access to nature, beauty, habitat, etc. And same idea, the large underutilized asphalt surface on the left has been converted to a park, still providing emergency access and enough resilient surface for people to walk down to the river, but adding these other layers and functions and benefits in the same space. So it's just thinking more strategically about every spot. And so the sites is a framework for identifying and implementing practicable and measurable sustainable practices in all the areas that go into site design, including construction operations, maintenance, and long-term measurement. I mentioned ecosystem services. Some of you are probably familiar with this term, but basically a way to quantify what are those benefits that landscapes can provide if they are allowed to and stewarded to provide. And there's different people have done lists of literally hundreds of different ecosystem services, and sites targets a number of them and puts metrics around them. And so the basic concept, which is just good practice from a landscape architecture standpoint, is first to protect areas that are already producing a lot of ecosystem services, i.e. Our remnant landscapes and ecologies that are already rich and healthy and may need additional intervention and more activation from a human stewardship standpoint, but are largely intact. So protecting those which are a tiny fraction of our landscapes, so they need to be protected, and then to improve ones that are degraded. And then regenerate life on surfaces that are completely altered. So it's kind of three tiers that are on a spectrum from the standpoint of where you start. And there are a set of guiding principles, and I'm not going to read through these, but you have access to them both on the site's website as well as on. I'll share this program with you, but basic good foundation. Do no harm, so not altering something that is already an intact system, and there's ways that we define that. Design with nature and culture, so it's this bringing together of people and place and living systems, the natural living systems together, supporting the living process, a systems thinking approach, so a holistic approach as opposed to a linear approach, which is really hard to get out of, and most buildings and sites are designed and built with more of a linear approach and cost driven only, and that needs to be folded into a more holistic approach to get the most benefit and the most function long term. And integrity and leadership and research. And so this is a constantly evolving thing. As we build more and measure more, we learn more and continue to adapt. And that's really, really important. Fostering environmental stewardship. So this idea of a relationship with the living systems of a land rather than being kind of a dictatorial or top down. It's really being informed by what's happening and adapting to that is really important to get these benefits. And there's basically 4 areas of focus: creating regenerative systems and fostering resiliency. And that's a term that you're hearing more and more as we are adapting to more rapid change in climate conditions and in hydrology and in habitat ranges and in lots of things. So we're experiencing more rapid change and need to be more adaptive to that change and through how we operate our landscapes, ensuring future resource supply and mitigating climate change. So that's a focus. Transforming the market through design, development, and maintenance practices. So how things are actually operated, and then a strong focus on human well-being and strengthening community. And so rather than isolated places, the relationship between people and their place and other places. And these are detailed, basically breakdown of topics underneath those headings. I'm not going to read through these, but you can see some of the basic principles: conserving water, reusing and recycling material on site, minimizing the movement of materials to the degree practical. So there's an embodied energy in everything, and so that has to be accounted for. And so keeping, for example, soil on site, even if you're moving it around some, is just reduces the energy footprint of that, all things being equal. So just good practices that relates to thinking of all the systems and flows. Reconnecting humans to nature, really a fundamental principle that weaves through really many of these, many of the strategies. And that I mentioned: living surfaces, green roofs, green walls, and then add grade solutions that are providing functions like water management and water balance, but also ecology and visual and physical connection to living surfaces for people that are especially in dense urban areas. Because we know the degree to which we are connected to and have access to healthy plants and ecologies and water, it reduces stress, it calms our breathing and heart rates, and therefore we heal better, learn better, heal faster, and so it affects us as physical human species. And so providing those surfaces where people are is a strong part of the concept. All right, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual guide or the tool. And so it is, as I said, it's a rating system, and it's been updated already. We're on version 2, and it's continuing to be looked at, and as more projects are certified and measured, it's going to the metrics will continue to be refined over time, just like LEED. And actually, we didn't start this way, but sites has become one of the U.S. Green Building Council's family of rating systems. And so U.S. Green Building Council operates LEED as well, the well building standard now, sites, and LEED for communities. So a number of different rating systems are under that umbrella, and sites is one of them. And there's tie-ins between, for example, that are intentional between sites and leads so that they're complementary tools. There is a rating system which describes the credit system and how that works and how to get a site certified. And then there's a reference guide that goes more in depth in terms of how to achieve points in each of those credit categories. So there's a lot of resources to help to design and implement sites using sites. There are categories of the different point areas. They're in 10 sections, and it basically follows all of the steps that go into the conception, design, construction, and long-term maintenance of a site. So section 1, site context, is really about the planning and the appropriateness of a use for a particular site. And just some points there. Then there's pre-design section that covers pre-design in a process as you're taking steps to evaluate a site for a particular use. And then there are 4 areas of site design: water, soil and vegetation, materials, and then a category on human health and well-being. And there are point areas for each of those. And then there's a section specifically about construction practices and how the design is implemented. Hiring practices, as well as materials, as well as energy use, are all fall under that category. And then there's a section on operations and maintenance. And actually, I'll mention it here. I think it's in a couple of other slides too. But the points are a number of credits under each of these sections, and some of which are prerequisites. And in order to be certified, you need to do all the prerequisites. So there's like some basic fundamental things that if you don't do all of these things, you're not going to be on that spectrum of a sustainable site. And one of those is developing a maintenance and operations plan with the design, so that you are designing something that is already, there's a plan in place for long-term maintenance and stewardship, and there's a plan to how that is to be staffed or funded or whatever is necessary to make sure the resources are in place to carry on whatever the design intent was, so that it's not lost. And that's been one of probably the largest failure of any of these sustainable strategies, is that they're well conceived and well designed, but there's not, as they're handed on to the maintenance, long-term maintenance after construction, there's a disconnect there. And so this is to make sure that that doesn't happen. And then there's 2 more sections. One is on education and performance monitoring. And so this gets to continuing to learn about the effects of doing certain things and adapting that to different georegions and climatic conditions within. And sites it's US based, but it's now international, and there are certified sites all over the world, and it's been taken to other countries as well as in North America, US and Canada. And then also there's some points around education and making people that visit a site or work in a site, if it's a workplace or a school or a hospital, that there's opportunities for people that use that place to understand and learn about the sustainable site strategies and how it relates to them. And then lastly, there's a section on innovation and exemplary performance over and above the credit category. So those are the 10 sections. And then I'm just going to show you, not go through, this is the list of all the credits and the point, and this is a little worksheet that you use in setting up your project to go through all those credits with your team and to track where you are in the design process. And then as you actually go through implementation and construction, and actually to get certified, you have to go through the design and actual construction. So it's a longer process, but it's a very tangible way to assess performance of your site under those different categories. And you can see there's a lot of specific credit categories under each of those topics. And you can see the ones that are in light blue are with a P in front of them. Those are the prerequisites. So limiting development on farmland, protecting floodplain functions, conserving aquatic ecosystems, regulated wetlands, for example. So some of these are pretty basic, like following the rules. So you have to provide the stormwater management that's required and not filling in floodplain or floodway. Things are already regulated, so it's kind of reinforcing whatever the local regulations are. And then there's ways to go beyond that. Conserving habitats for threatened and endangered species. Those are all prerequisites. I'm going to point this out, using an integrative design process. So having all perspectives for all these aspects of site design and construction, working collaboratively in the pre-design and design, so that you don't get to all the way to the end and then put it out to bid and give it to a contractor, and then it's untenable, or there's not a practical way to do what is designed. So it's having construction expertise and perspective, as well as long-term operations and maintenance and stewardship perspective, as well as other specialized areas, soil biology if necessary, or horticulture, or whatever other skill sets are necessary in the design process, working collaboratively. So and there's a way to quantify that to meet this prerequisite. Looking at your site from a sustainability standpoint as part of the pre-design process is really, really important, and that's why it's a prerequisite. And then this one here, I'm just going to mention, designate and communicate. This stands for Vegetation and Soil Protection Zone, VSPZ. And it's basically saying don't grade or disturb a portion of site that doesn't need to be, because there's a living ecology in undisturbed soil, or relatively undisturbed soil, even in farmland, compared to a completely altered site. And so when you have those areas, then protect them and bring back life, because you're already starting way further down the path than if it's a site that's mass graded and already altered. So that's a really important point, and that actually carries through a number of the other credits. Let's see. And there's actually a lot, some under construction that relate to that same point. So managing soil movement and making sure that those vegetation soil protection zones are identified and then communicated to contractors and all those that are constructing the site. That carries through to the construction process, and then restoring soils that are disturbed, that are part of the landscape in a proper way. Those are also prerequisites. So you can start to see how there's a relationship between these. It's all been thought through, and it's really a very, very helpful, very valuable tool to get at a higher level of ecosystem services than you otherwise would by not necessarily paying attention to it. There's certainly other important requirements built into it, and this is a pilot credit specifically focused on safety, and there's always been a credit that relates to managing sites to minimize risk of wildfire, which is certainly the case to some degree in some of our Michigan landscapes. It's more so out in the south and the west part of the country. That's a much more prevalent issue, but that's been incorporated. But there's also now this pilot credit focusing on safety. So this has been added, and there's a couple of other, I don't think I have them in here, a credit on carbon sequestration that's been piloted, and then I think one other pilot credit. There's basically 200 total points, and there's different levels of certification: basic certification, and then silver, gold, and platinum. Kind of like LEED, it's following that same kind of approach. And like I said, now it is part of USGBC's family of rating systems. This is a little bit older statistic. I think there's more of the projects that have been certified, but over 200 registered and certified projects representing a broad range of project types, geographies, locations, etc. And some are parks and streetscapes, different building types, uses. So a good cross section of projects, and really a lot has been done to evolve the tool from the initial set of projects. So it's really become a very robust tool. It's been endorsed by being adopted by a number of different municipalities that regulate building site construction. The General Services Administration has adopted sites as well as LEED as a performance standard for all GSA properties, which is a pretty major deal. And they see the benefit and value of performance-based practices as benefiting the common trust, all the properties that they develop and manage, as well as some states, Rhode Island, several other states have looked at it and have adopted, maybe not in totality, but aspects of sites into their into state-funded developments. And then a number of municipalities, including City of Atlanta, and I know there's a number of other cities that have adopted it or parts of it. This is Christian Gabriel, is a colleague who's a landscape architect with GSA and was instrumental in getting it adopted as a standard, and seeing the value of performance-based sites for everything that they're operating. And Kevin Burke, who was down in Atlanta, used sites for a green belt around the entire city, the Beltline. And I know that the city of Detroit is looking at this. Some of the folks in GST are looking at sites and performance-based practices for the Joe Louis Greenway and other restorative initiatives on public land in the city of Detroit as well. There's online tools, a way to register your project. Even if you don't go through certification, you get it's a resource, and there's different, you can kind of get into it incrementally, and so it's beneficial to even if you're thinking about it without committing, to register a project and start to look at it from the standpoint of performance. There's also a certification for professionals that are doing sites projects, sites accredited professional. And so understanding all aspects of site performance, and there's an exam, and then ongoing continuing education that's required to maintain sites, being a sites AP. And so it's really helpful to be aware of and have that certification. So it's just a good way to make sure you've got the bases covered to get these qualities in your projects. And then there's now, this is more recently, something called a sites community partner. So the township could choose to become a community partner and basically collaborate with others that are focused on performance-based site practices. You can see some of the names. Some of them are municipalities, and I'm not seeing some educational. University of Cincinnati, the landscape architecture program there. There's a couple of firms I know. Smith Group is one of the community partners. Greenridge Healthy Cities is or an organization that I'm associated with through the Green Infrastructure Foundation that's promoting living surfaces on roofs and walls. So a good collaboration of people that are all focused in the same area of our performance-based practices. Now, that's, and I don't know where we're at, a little bit more. So I've got just maybe one other thing, and then I've got a bunch of examples, which I won't go through right now, but I was thinking about, I know you all are looking at a cemetery site, and there's also just kind of beginning to be some more awareness about the potential for sites of this use to be less disruptive and more sustainable. And this is just something I found as I was thinking about today's meeting, and just comparing conventional practices to those that are less disruptive. And so minimizing the use of chemicals that are entered into the ground and therefore can enter into the groundwater, minimizing soil disruption, or putting back more of a living system as opposed to a simple turf grass, to the degree possible given the use, and other things that can be incorporated into really any site, including cemetery sites. And so, I know you've all have already been looking at some of these resources too, so I'm not going to duplicate that, but just having that awareness of how a site works, and then what the impact of the use is, and how to get those to be better aligned. And then just one quick example that, and I've been part of a number of different site certified projects, some that have gone through certification, some that were pilot projects initially, and then some subsequently. And this is one of the pilot projects that was already implemented, but then they went back and got site certification. This is an area of the Morton Arboretum, which is a large botanic garden in Chicago. And when they built a new visitor center, they expanded their parking lot and doubled the size of the visitor parking lot. And I'm circling it here with my mouse, and it doubled to this area here. This is a lot of this is floodplain of the Des Plaines, the DuPage River. So you can see it coming through here. And so this is floodplain area, and they were able to get permission to expand, but only because we were managing more water and doing a better job than the previous, even by expanding, by using permeable pavement and bioretention in all of this 600-car parking lot. And the end result was not only better water management by expanding this into an old field here, but it actually improves water quality such that the overflow from this does go into this. It's not allowed to go into the river. It goes into this Meadow Lake, which is a natural lake, and has a naturalized shoreline. And the ecology of this lake has actually improved since putting this parking lot expansion in, because all the water is buffered and treated and cleansed and cooled before getting here. And there's actually new, more conservative species that have volunteered in some of this wetland fringe than existed prior to that. So it's actually an improvement in ecosystem services and ecology by expanding the infrastructure, but in a way that is following these principles. And here's a picture. You can see the bioswales that are in between each bay of parking, and then this is all permeable pavement. So it's really doing a great job of absorbing and infiltrating much of the rainwater that's falling on this, and then seeping eventually over to the lake. And this has also been measured by another program called the Landscape Architecture Foundation's Landscape Performance Series, where they measure performance and work with teams of researchers and the professionals that built the project to quantify performance. And these are some statistics that came out of that that show the environmental benefits and how much rainwater is attenuated, social benefits from the standpoint of education and awareness, economic benefits from the standpoint of money savings because of these different practices that are taking into account sustainable maintenance and stewardship versus conventional. So this has all been measured, and it's a way to grow and expand the idea, as well as showing the benefits that have accrued to the Arboretum. And there's a picture on the lakeside. The parking lot's on the other side of this berm, and you can see the aquatic shoreline that's right next to where. And basically, what happens is that water seeps into the ground, and then it's distributed through a flow spreader along this edge for any overflow that comes this way. So it's treated and buffered. So I know I covered a lot in that, and I was going to go try to be more brief so I could get to your questions.
Well, it's really not fair to force you to describe a lifetime work in 20 minutes or a half hour or even an hour, but thank you so much. I know we have some questions. Why don't we get right to it? And whoever, I know there's one in the chat window as well. Thank you so much for being here, David.
Absolutely. Okay, I see the question from Michelle. Interested to know what resources you want to stay up to date on invasive plant lists. Excellent question. So resources on the dynamic nature of invasive plants, especially with changing climate conditions. I can't think of a good single resource. I think it's networks of people that are doing stewardship in our natural areas. And and then I know, it depends on
Uh-oh. I think he froze. Uh-oh.
You froze up. You can, while he's frozen, I'll say you can add Michelle to your list of resources.
Well, I am working with more landscape architectures these days in my new role. So I'm curious. We're trying to make sure that, people are aware of resources and have access. And yeah, that's a great resource for Michigan. And then I represent the Midwest Invasive Plant Network. So that's for the entire Midwest. But yeah, I don't know if you can hear me, David, but I've seen your project at Morton and it's really nice. I've had a chance to admire it and it's very exciting to know that you were behind that work. Did we lose him? Oh, there.
Sorry about that.
Yay, he's back.
So I don't know if you heard any of that, but I was answering Michelle's question about invasive plants and resources, and I know the Michigan Wildflower Network is a good resource, and they have an annual conference which is quite excellent. There's a number in our state chapter of ASLA, American Society of Landscape Architects, that keeps up with it too, and I know there's some others here in Michigan, but I would say that those networks are probably the best way. There's not, I mean, there's good stuff online and in print too, but it is a dynamic condition, and I mean, it's dynamic in some ways, but usually you hear about the things that are the most heinous threats, but then there's kind of the practicality of just what's going on in
I think we lost you again, David.
or not. But all right, did I lock up again?
Um,
I'm gonna turn off my video because it says my connection is getting unstable.
Kim Peters was next. Go ahead, Kim, and then Sarah.
Hi, yeah, I just had a quick question about permeable pavement. Have you found pavements that work better or worse than, I'm talking about the materials used to make the pavement permeable? Because I know oh, go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
Well, the MSU surplus store and recycling center had permeable pavement in their parking lot, and it looks like when they recently redid the parking lot, it's just regular asphalt now. And they had kind of what looked like an asphalt-based permeable pavement prior to that.
Right, and so I would say that generally speaking, and I've been working with a number of colleagues using permeable pavement systems for about the last 15, 18 years, and the generally speaking, the best, easiest to maintain and best functioning over time are the interlocking concrete unit paving systems that integrate permeable shapes that are interlocking, but also provide permeability through the void spaces between the pavers and with an underlayment of open graded materials. And as opposed to permeable asphalt or permeable concrete, I know there are mixes that basically sort out the fines from the aggregate and then are put with a binder and then spread. The challenge with especially the permeable asphalt and permeable concrete is that if you get fine material that goes in and gets caught up in those void spaces, it's impossible to wash it through. And so it's not as easily maintained, especially over longer periods of time, all things being equal. And then you get at the benefits of an interlocking unit paving system versus a resilient paving system like concrete or asphalt, just permeability aside. and it's a more resilient, more flexible pavement system. There is a generally mostly a bit of a cost premium. So without looking at life cycle costs, and if you're looking at cost only, which is a huge driver, oftentimes it's not it's not possible to fit into site budget. So that's where looking at all these things holistically up front is important to get to set budgets that are that then make sense. So if you got all the way down to the end and you're looking at which pavement should I use, this or this, then it's oftentimes you're kind of locked out of a broader range of choices. So, but generally speaking, like I said, the unit pavers work better. We've installed literally acres of permeable pavement in projects in city street and in parking lots and in pathways. And so tailoring the pavement to the use is I mean, it's just good practice regardless of whether it's permeable or not. But really these systems work well in any application except for a higher speed roadway. So anything over about a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit, you get tire noise and some other issues. But it's especially in our cold weather climates in the Midwest. One of the questions that comes up often is about snow and ice removal. And again, a properly designed and properly installed permeable pavement system and calibrating the snow removal equipment so that it's not scraping the surface with a metal blade, but with a nylon edge. These are details, but they're really important details, and it kind of gets at the depth of this integrated design process, because you got to talk through all this stuff. And we've worked with maintenance teams from cities and looked at their maintenance equipment and talked about it during the design process before the investment was made, just to make sure that there wouldn't be a failure somewhere down the line, even after it was design improved. And there's still been a few setbacks, and then we have to unpack the reasons why those setbacks occurred and continue to advance.
We have about 10 more minutes. Just want to make sure we get to all the questions, but someone else had a comment. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kim. You had a quick question or a quick follow-up to that.
I was just going to ask if concrete here in Michigan, we get a lot of heaving. Do you have a similar problem with the interlocking bricks or pavement stones?
It's less, all things being equal, there's less. And then one of the things with interlocking system is that it forms kind of a blanket. And so you can get a bit of movement without getting differential settling compared to concrete, which is one resilient surface that then is going to break and crack. So it's better, but you're still going to get you can still get some movement. It depends on your subgrade preparation, a number of different factors. So proper design and subgrade are all critical, regardless of the pavement type. And then if there is some heaving, it's much easier to pull up some pavers, to remove some material, recompact, and put it back without scarring, without even wasting the materials, compared to a resilient asphalt or concrete surface. So, so even if you do get some heaving, you can fix it more easily with less impact.
Thank you, David. That was a great presentation. So my question is mindset. So I'm curious, when people are coming into thinking about sites, is the mind, or typically what are you seeing? Are you seeing people are saying, we have a problem that we need to fix? Or are they coming in with the mindset of, we want to be environmentally minded in our approach? I mean, I imagine probably both to a certain degree, but I'm just curious in terms of in who's wanting to do this amazing, list of things to be environmentally minded. Is it usually they're coming in because they're already environmentally minded, or are they going, oh my gosh, we have a brownfield, or we have this or that we need to fix?
Right. So excellent question. Why is it, there's and I would say that the projects that I mentioned and shared, they're largely the typical early adopters that are already thinking from the standpoint of sustainability and performance. And a lot of educational institutions, others that are already focused on environmental improvement and protection. The GSA was interesting, but then it kind of gets to the next tier, which is where is the funding and support? And as there are growing number of state and federal programs that are tied to different facets of sustainability, i.e. flood management, water quality, now more and more energy, clean energy, and climate adaptation. So there are programs that are providing funding for projects under with these specific performance characteristics in mind, and sites is a good way to demonstrate compliance with the intent of those programs. And so that's where it's growing. Aren't made closely enough yet, but that's it's moving that direction. And then I mentioned funding and support. So another example I was with you is here in Grand Rapids, the John Ball Zoo has adopted metrics to quantify performance and is the first site certified zoo in the world. And they have one of their more recent exhibits, the meerkat exhibit, is a site certified exhibit within the zoo. They're also getting certification for the entire zoo, and is also pursuing Living Building Challenge for a number of their projects. They've gotten LEED certification on some of their projects. So as they develop out next stages, building performance and performance monitoring and certification, because their funders are looking for differentiating from an environmental standpoint and using the zoo as a vehicle to look at worldwide conservation. So it ties to their mission and focus. But there's more and more philanthropic organizations with a strong sustainable focus. And it's basically sites can be a shorthand way to communicate a whole clump of environmental performance aspects in one easy way. And so that's I think so it's really looking at, what are the drivers of a particular place, and then tying to how do we achieve what those drivers are seeking, and using performance measurement as a way to connect those dots.
Thank you. What zoo did you say?
John Ball Zoo in
Okay,
Grand
thank you.
Rapids.
Thanks.
Another
Sam?
site certified project in Grand Rapids is at Grand Valley State University. And it's part of a whole campus-wide stormwater management and ravine restoration planning effort that's been underway for over 10 years. And that was actually one of the sites pilot projects was a large regional water management, ecology, and sports complex at Grand Valley. So another good example.
Hey, so David, a quick question for you regarding the human well-being points.
Mhm.
So, well, they're a little different than the rest of them on the scorecard, only because, so many of these can be measured with physical dimensions, square footage or cubic yards in business like this. But when it comes to the human well-being category, actually, I'm working with a group that is asking me what they can use for metrics to measure the how well a site would perform in this category of human well-being.
Mhm.
And I'm struggling trying to make up things. I've got some ideas, but if you have some thoughts on that, that'd be helpful.
Yes, to me, it's the most important category, because we're designing places for people and to be restorative for people. And yet it's the hardest one to pin down in terms of precise metrics. And so there's a growing body of research, like I said, that makes, some of you heard the term biophilia, and just the raising awareness that the degree to which we as people are connected to a healthy living place, it does result in better health. But it's like many things, it's more complicated than that. So understanding the reasons why. There's a researcher, Bill Sullivan, out of University of Illinois, a lot of really interesting research around this topic, but it's just still kind of scratching the surface. So in the meanwhile, the metric making an intent to connect people to living systems. So the that I worked most on in the system is basically having water feature or what like and the idea being stormwater basins, water management be visibly and physically accessible to people. So rather than fencing off the detention basin because it's going to flood and it's a danger, integrating that into the design and managing the water upstream of the detention basin so that you have a healthy ecology, and then making that part of the program space of your site is a concept that the credits line up with. Just because all things being equal, having more living surfaces in close visual and physical proximity to people is better. But we can't say it's going to reduce your healthcare costs by 17% or really tight. It probably 20 years from now we'll be able to do that, but at the moment we can't. So we do the best we can with what we got, and so just close proximity, and then raising awareness, education. Just the more there's ways to quantify the efforts to reinforce that connection between people. Some things are pretty obvious: non-smoking, air quality, some basic things. I think there's some good tools within that category that will be helpful, but it's definitely a work in process.
Just being outside is probably a healthy indicator how many people take their breaks outside.
Yeah, and having better access to outside and building the outside into the programming of the building so that you have lunch space, gathering space, et cetera, in close proximity of where people are working or studying or whatever.
I'm sure we have lots more questions. If you wouldn't mind sharing your email, David, really appreciate it. Wendy, thank you so much for referring David to us and for being a part of these conversations. And Michelle, it's great to see you. Any other last parting comments from anybody before we move on?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, great presentation.
All right. Well, thank you all. And yeah, please do. I put my email in the chat. Please, if you have follow-up questions, let me know. And I'll do what I can to help. And good luck on your efforts. And I'll try to stay connected through Sam and Wendy as you're moving along.
Fantastic. First Wednesday of May, I want to. Todd Nichols was on this conversation earlier. He's the director of the East Lansing Wastewater Recovery Facility, and he'll be with us on that Wednesday. Next week is open, and hope to see some of you then. But thanks again, David, and everybody for tuning in.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.